Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Major 2 qualifiers of the Call of Duty League kicks off next Friday. So with that being said, I would like to just look at each team's path to Major, determine who has the easiest. So in this video, we will look at every team and say who's got the easiest schedule, what's each team's toughest opponent, what's each team's most difficult opponent, and what team do they match up best in this major. With that being said, let's get into it. Before we look at each team specifically, I'd like to point at the way I've done this. And so in order to do that, we have to know how is the schedule made and the way qualifiers works. This year, every team plays 7 matches in a qualifier. And as you see on the screen, I've selected the Los Angeles Thieves just as an example. We see all 7 matches right here on the screen. Each of their opponents have been selected prior to the season starts, and that's just to make sure that every platy plays everybody the same amount of times. Every team plays 7 matches, but not every team has the same schedule as their opponents. So for instance, Team A could play the top 7 teams and be 7-0. And Team B could play the bottom 7 teams and be 7-0. I would say that Team A, playing the more difficult opponents, looks to be the better team. So they will be more impressive and they'll sit higher in my power rankings versus Team B, because even though they're 7-0, they haven't played the top teams. Looking at the strength of schedule, you might be wondering what's the formula? How do you determine what's the best? That's what we're talking about on the screen. So we are 1 major into the season. What I've done is for each team, I've taken all of their opponents, laid out the win-loss ratio of each opponent, added up the total wins, added up the total of losses, and then got their win percentage from that. And that will give us the higher the percentage, the more difficult that their schedule is. That's how I've determined it, and we will get right into the very first team, which is the most difficult. We're going to go from most difficult to easiest schedule. The most difficult, the 12th easiest schedule of this major qualifier is the Minnesota Rokkr. I'm going to go through a quick list of who they play. They play Toronto Ultra, Optic Texas, Boston Breach, Atlanta FaZe, Los Angeles Thieves, Seattle Surge, and Miami Heretic. And so we see their opponent records right there. If you add them all up, they're 41-30, which is 50. They've won 57.75% of their matchup. When looking at the total matchups, their most difficult matchup comes against Toronto Ultra, who is 7-0 and major champions. And over the course of your video, you will see that as a regular pattern, Toronto Ultra just being the most difficult opponent for a lot of these teams. And their easiest opponent, or least difficult matchup, is the Los Angeles Thieves. And their best matchup, who they match up the best against, is the Optic Texas. And so I have percentages on this chart over here, and according to my calculations, as of right now, that's just their percentage to win the match. So we see Toronto Ultra, they only have a 37% chance of beating Toronto. Rokkr does. Whenever taking into account all their opponents and how they play, I think this team is possible that they come out 3-4, cementing them a winners bracket start and 7th place. That does it for Minnesota Rokkr. And in the second most difficult schedule is the Los Angeles Thieves. And right now, I think they're dead last in standings. They only have 1 win. I believe it's versus Boston Breach, but they have a really tough go, as we've just seen some of their teams that they play against. But their opponents have a 57.33% win chance. And just to give you an example, I think they play all 4 of the top 4 teams. Like I'm looking, they play Optic Texas, Miami Heretics, Minnesota Rokkr, Atlanta FaZe, Las Vegas Legion, Los Angeles Guerrillas, and Toronto Ultra. So their toughest matchup is the Toronto Ultra. Like I said, that's just going to be a pattern over the whole video. Their easiest matchup, which also tends to be their best, is Los Angeles Guerrillas. However, the Thieves versus Guerrillas only have 1 win, not counting preseason tournaments, only have 1 win in the Call of Duty League. And I think Guerrilla has, I could be wrong, but I think it's 6. So I think the overall series is 6-1 to the Guerrillas. So looking at their opponents, I think their most likely record is 0-7. I could see them possibly getting 1 or 2, but just looking at the math, it looks like they're going to have 0 wins and end up in 12th place starting in the elimination bracket once again. However, the team has made 2 roster changes. With these roster changes, my stats are kind of like out of whack because I don't know how this team is going to play. I can only look at what this team has done and then base my stats on that. Next up, the 10th easiest schedule is the Miami Heat. Their opponents' records come out at 57.75%. And once again, their toughest matchup, Toronto Ultra. Their easiest matchup is the Los Angeles Thieves, and their best matchup is New York Subliner. Just looking at their overall opponents, they play Toronto Ultra first off, and then they go Atlanta FaZe. They're playing 1 and 2 back to back. But then it gets a little bit easier. They play Las Vegas, or they play the Vegas Legion, Vegas Legion, Los Angeles Thieves, New York Subliners, which is their best matchup, Carolina Royal Ravens, and Minnesota Rocker. And looking at this, they're most likely to come out at 5 and 2, and that would give them the 4th place spot, which is pretty decent for this Miami team. They had a pretty good last major. They went into the tournament and ended up not winning a single map. So with this roster change that they've just made, this 4th place spot going into the major, I think will be great, and they are looking to be a contender in this next major. That does it for the 10th easiest schedule. Next up, number 9 is the Atlanta FaZe. And Atlanta FaZe plays Miami Heretics, New York Subliners, Minnesota Rocker, Toronto Ultra, Los Angeles Thieves, Boston Breach, and Los Angeles Guerrillas. And their overall opponents' records are 34 and 33. So almost to that 50% mark. They are 50.75% win-loss percentage. And their toughest matchup, which is also their best matchup and my match to watch over this entire major, Atlanta FaZe versus Toronto Ultra. Toronto does look like they have the upper hand. Atlanta only has a 46.09% chance of winning. Once again, easiest matchup, Los Angeles Thieves. They have a 72.42% chance of winning, and I think their most likely record is 6 and 1, giving them the 2nd place, and their only loss would be against the Toronto Ultra. That is it for Atlanta FaZe. Now we're going into the 8th easiest schedule, which is Boston Breach. Boston Breach are the 8th team, and the opponents they play are the Carolina Royal Ravens, New York Subliners, Minnesota Rocker, Vegas Legion, Opta Texas, Atlanta FaZe, and Seattle Surge. And their opponents' records come out to be 37 and 36, giving them a 50.68 win percentage. Their toughest matchup is Atlanta FaZe, and they only have a 36.77% chance of winning that. Their easiest matchup is their very first match versus Carolina Royal Ravens, and they have a 57.08% chance. And their best matchup is the Vegas Legion, which is right dab in the middle of their schedule, and they have a 50.3% chance of winning that. So I think that one's going to be a really good game to watch. I think Boston's most likely record is a 2 and 5, getting wins against Carolina and Vegas. I think they're projected to win against Vegas, but that's only going to give them the 9th place team, just missing out on the winners bracket once again. However, plenty of those. They did just make a roster change. Asim's coming in to play on this team, and I think he's really good veteran leadership that could come in. And Boston Breach, I don't think they've won a single map 5, and they've played a few, and they're just not clutching these situations. So I think bringing Asim in will really help them clutch up in those final situations, just because he's got more experience and is able to do that. And that brings us to our 7th easiest team, Toronto Ultra. And their records, their opponent's win-loss record goes right smack dab in the middle at 50%. And they play Miami Heretics, Minnesota Rocker, Vegas Legion, Seattle Surge, Atlanta FaZe, Optic Texas, and Los Angeles Thieves. And of those matches, their toughest, which is also going to be their best matchup, like I said earlier with Atlanta, is the Atlanta FaZe. And Toronto is favored to win that, and it'll be by 50. They are 53.91% favorite to win it. And their easiest matchup is Los Angeles Thieves, another pattern we will continue to see. Their most likely record is 7-0, which will give them this first place, as you see right there. But I think they look unstoppable. They're in a tier of their own. Now we are at our halfway point, and from here on, it's only the schedules are keep getting easier to easier. Stick around to see the number one easiest, and that gives us number 6, New York Subliners. New York Subliners are sitting at their opponent win-loss record is sitting at 48.61% win-loss percentage, and they play Carolina Royal Ravens, Seattle Surge, Boston Breach, Atlanta FaZe, Miami Heretics, Los Angeles Guerrillas, and Optic Texas. Their toughest matchup is Atlanta FaZe, which is smack dab in the middle of their schedule, and I think their toughest matchup right there in the middle is really good because they have the tune-ups going into it, and then afterwards that gives them 3 matches to fix some things that they can that are easy to fix. And their easiest matchup is versus Los Angeles Guerrillas. They have a 57.34% chance to win that, and their best matchup comes against Optic Texas. They've played once before this year, and New York won it 3-2, I think, and a really close search and destroy at the end. The New York's most likely record is 4-3, giving them the winner's bracket start at 6th place. That does it for number 6. Now, number 5. The number 5 easiest team is Los Angeles Guerrillas. And Los Angeles Guerrillas have 48 opponents have 48.57% win-loss percentage. They play the Vegas Legion, Optic Texas, Seattle Surge, Carolina Royal Ravens, New York Subliners, Los Angeles Thieves, and Atlanta FaZe. And that very last matchup is their toughest matchup. And last time they played, Atlanta FaZe 3-0'd them in the winner's bracket round 1 of this last major. And Los Angeles Guerrillas only have a 36.52% chance of winning that one. Their easiest matchup, the one that we talked about a bit ago, versus the Los Angeles Thieves, is versus the Los Angeles Thieves. They have a 59.56% chance of winning that. And then their closest matchup right now is the Vegas Legion at 50.35% chance. I think their most likely record is 3-4, giving them a winner's bracket start right at 8th place. But that 8th place puts them against Ultra if everything goes according to the predictions. That does it for number 5. Now the 4th easiest team. We're getting down to the wire. Top 4. Here we go. Optic Texas. Their opponents' records are 31-36, giving them a 46.27% win-loss percent. And they play Los Angeles Thieves, Minnesota Rocker, Los Angeles Guerrillas, Carolina Royal Ravens, Boston Breach, Toronto Ultra, and New York Subliners. Their toughest matchup is versus the Toronto Ultra, and that is their second to last matchup. And then they only have a 38% or 38.97% chance of beating Toronto Ultra. And then their easiest matchup is the Los Angeles Thieves, and they have a 63.96% chance of winning that. And their best matchup, we just talked about it with New York Subliners, is that week 1 rematch versus them. With their record, I see them going 5-2 and getting the 3rd place start in winner's bracket at this next Major 2 tournament. That does it for number 4. Now number 3 is Seattle Surge. And Seattle Surge has opponents have a record of 31-37, and they have a 45.59% chance, or 45.59% win-loss percentage chance. And they play New York Subliners, Carolina Royal Ravens, Toronto Ultra, Los Angeles Guerrillas, Minnesota Rocker, Las Vegas Legion, and Boston Breach. And of those, their 3rd matchup versus Toronto Ultra is their toughest matchup. As you see right here, they only have a 36.29% chance of winning. But their easiest matchup, which might be the closest easiest matchup other than the Thieves, would be Carolina Royal Ravens, and that is their 2nd matchup of the split. And their best matchup is the Boston Breach, which they aren't favored to win, but I think that match is going to be pretty good to watch. These are two like lower tier teams, but watching them fight it out will be entertaining. I think their most likely record is 5-2, giving them a 5th place in winners bracket seeding going into this next major. Number 2, we only got 2 teams left. Number 2 is Carolina Royal Ravens. Their opponents' records are 31-38, giving them a 44.93% win-loss percentage. And they play New York Subliners, Boston Breach, Seattle Surge, Optic Texas, Los Angeles Guerrillas, Miami Heretics, and Vegas Legion. And of those, their second to last match, Miami Heretics, that is their toughest match. And they only have a 35.34% chance of winning. However, it's going based on statistics from the entire season. This Ravens team upsetted the world champs at the major, and they looked pretty good. They made a roster change before the major. So I think this matchup could be really close, especially with Heretics making their roster change. This is a matchup I definitely want to circle. Their easiest matchup is versus the New York Subliners, which is a rematch from the elimination round 1 of this last major. Their best matchup is versus Vegas Legion. They have a 44% chance of winning. Even with all of this, I think they are most likely to end up... I'm looking at the wrong team. They are most likely to end up 1-7, giving them the 11th place seed, starting them in elimination bracket once again. This is it. We're all down to the 1 seed, or not 1 seed, easiest schedule coming up into this major, and that is Las Vegas Legion. Their opponent's record are 30-37, giving them a 44.78 win-loss percentage. They play Los Angeles Guerrillas, Miami Heretics, Toronto Ultra, Boston Breach, Los Angeles Thieves, Seattle Surge, Carolina Royal Ravens. The Vegas Legion's toughest matchup comes in their third matchup versus Toronto Ultra. Been a pattern this entire video. Toronto's just looking on fire. Vegas only have a 35.34% chance of winning that. Their easiest matchup is versus the Los Angeles Thieves, and that is their 5th matchup, and they have a 55.99% chance winning that one. Their best matchup, one to watch if you want to watch this team fight it out, would be versus Boston Breach, and they play right in the middle of the split. They are the 4th matchup, Vegas Legion. With Vegas's entire schedule, I see them ending in 2-5 in the 10th place, giving them another elimination bracket. So even though they have the easiest, they still have to come out and prove it, which they haven't looked like they can do. But that does it for each team's schedules. We see right here the easiest to most difficult, Vegas having the easiest schedule, and Rocker having the most difficult. We also see their projected win-loss record and their projected seeding going into this next bracket. If you have anything that you'd like to argue about or point out that I got something wrong, go ahead and list that down in the comments. Question for you, if you made it this far. With Vegas having the easiest schedule, how many wins do you think that they're going to get? I want to hear it all down in the comments. I thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys all in the morning.